Imagine standing in the middle of a muddy island in the Seine River, surrounded by wooden huts, rising smoke, merchants shouting in unfamiliar tongues, and warriors watching every stranger with suspicion. This isn't the Paris of cafes, fashion, or the Eiffel Tower. This is Paris in 250 BCE, and it looks nothing like the city you know today. Back then, Paris wasn't even called Paris. It was known as Lutetia, a small but strategically important settlement built by a Celtic tribe known as the Parisii. Long before Roman roads, cathedrals, and kings, this place was a rugged and thriving center of trade and survival. And if you lived here in 250 BCE, your world would be dangerous, deeply spiritual, and constantly shifting. Welcome to ancient Paris, more than 2,200 years ago. To understand Paris in 250 BCE, you have to erase every modern image from your mind. No grand stone buildings, no elegant bridges, no wide boulevards. Instead, picture a river valley wrapped in thick forests, marshland, and scattered settlements. The Seine River is the heartbeat of everything. At its center lies a natural island, what we now know as Île de la Cité. This island is where the earliest version of Paris began. For the Parisii, it wasn't just land, it was security. Surrounded by water, it offered protection against enemies. And because boats regularly passed through, it became a key stop for trade routes linking northern Europe to the Mediterranean world. That location made the Parisii influential, not in the sense of marble palaces or vast armies, but in control. They controlled movement along the river, and in the ancient world, controlling trade meant controlling power. The settlement itself was simple but active. Wooden houses with thatched roofs stood close together. Smoke from cooking fires filled the air. Animals wandered freely. Mud covered the ground during rain. There were no paved streets, no drainage systems, and no public sanitation. Life was practical, demanding, and deeply tied to the rhythms of nature. But this was far from a primitive village. It was organized, connected, and politically significant. Ancient Paris was already becoming an important trade center in Europe. The people who lived here were Celts, specifically the tribe known as the Parisii. They were part of a larger Celtic world stretching across much of Europe. And despite the stereotypes later written by Roman historians, they were not uncivilized. They were skilled artisans, farmers, traders, and warriors. In fact, the Parisii minted their own coins, a major sign of economic sophistication. That means they had established trade systems and regional influence. Archaeologists have discovered these coins, proving how connected they were. Their society was structured. At the top were nobles and warrior elites. Below them were craftsmen, merchants, and farmers. And beneath those groups were laborers and servants. Spiritual leaders known as druids held tremendous authority. They were priests, judges, teachers, and keepers of knowledge. Religion shaped every part of life. The Parisii worshipped gods tied to rivers, forests, animals, and the changing seasons. Sacred groves served as places of ceremony. Offerings, rituals, and seasonal festivals were central to their culture. Their belief system focused less on dominating nature and more on existing within it. That connection influenced everything, including warfare. Before battle, rituals were performed to seek divine favor. For the Parisii, survival wasn't only physical, it was spiritual. So what would everyday life in Lutetia actually feel like? Your day would begin at sunrise. Artificial light was limited, so daylight determined everything. Your home would likely be a wooden structure, insulated with clay and straw. Inside, it would be dim and smoky. A central hearth provided warmth and served as the place for cooking. Furniture was sparse. Beds were simple, often made of woven materials or animal furs. Breakfast might include coarse bread, porridge, cheese, and seasonal fruits. For most people, meat was not an everyday meal. Grains, vegetables, and fish from the Seine formed the core of the diet. If you were a blacksmith, your day would be spent shaping iron or bronze. If you were a farmer, the fields outside the settlement demanded constant labor. If you were a trader, you'd negotiate with travelers carrying salt, wine, pottery, and jewelry from distant regions. Markets were lively and multilingual. Goods from across Europe moved through the settlement. Children began working early. Education was mostly oral. Stories, traditions, and practical knowledge were passed down through generations. Life expectancy was short by modern standards. Disease, injuries, and conflict were ever-present dangers. But communities were close-knit. Family and tribe were essential for survival. No one lived entirely on their own. Everything was collective. In 250 BCE, Rome had not yet conquered Gaul, but its presence was growing. To the south, Roman influence expanded steadily, and the Celtic tribes of Gaul, including the Parisii, were aware of it. Trade with Mediterranean cultures brought foreign goods and ideas. Imported wine, ceramics, and luxury items began appearing in Celtic territories. These exchanges introduced new tastes, but also new political realities. Because wherever trade goes, ambition often follows. The Parisii could not ignore Rome forever. At this moment, they were still independent, still powerful in their region. But history was already moving toward a collision. Within 2 centuries, Julius Caesar would march into Gaul, and the world of the Parisii would be changed forever. Their tribal autonomy would fall under Roman rule. Lutetia would become a Roman city. Stone buildings, baths, roads, and forums would replace much of the Celtic landscape. But in 250 BCE, that future was still unknown. For now, Paris belonged to the Celts, and they had no idea how dramatically their story was about to change. What did ancient Paris actually feel like? It would feel alive but uncertain. The smell of smoke mixed with wet earth, the sound of riverboats scraping against wooden docks, the ring of metal in workshops, the quiet chanting of rituals in sacred spaces. At night, darkness would be complete. No streetlights, no electric glow, only firelight, moonlight, and stars. Around the hearth, stories would be told of gods, ancestors, and distant enemies. Every season mattered. Winter threatened survival. Harvests determined prosperity. Nature wasn't just scenery. It controlled life itself. There was beauty in that simplicity, but also hardship. To live here required resilience. This was not a city built for comfort. It was built for endurance. And in that endurance, the foundations of Paris were laid. When people think of Paris today, they imagine romance, art, and elegance. But beneath all of that lies something much older. A tribal island settlement, a Celtic people who understood trade, spirituality, and survival. The Parisii gave the city its earliest identity. Even the name Paris traces back to them. Though Rome would later reshape the region, the memory of the tribe endured. Their legacy survives in archaeology, coins, and fragments of recorded history. Without the Parisii, there is no Paris. And that's what makes 250 BCE so fascinating. It captures the city before empire, before kings, before revolutions, before it became one of the most famous capitals in the world. It was smaller, rougher, wilder, and deeply human. A place of ambition, belief, and adaptation. And in many ways, that ancient spirit still echoes in Paris today. So the next time you think of Paris, don't picture the Eiffel Tower first.
Picture a misty river island, wooden homes, Celtic traders, and a tribe laying the groundwork for a city that would one day shape the world. Because long before Paris became the city of light, it was a settlement of survival, and that story deserves to be remembered. If you enjoyed this journey into ancient history, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more untold stories from the world's greatest cities, because history is never as distant as it seems.